analysis versus lazy to and then salawat and salam to our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam by reciting Allahumma sholli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, and then thank you to our Mr. for occasion today. Okay, my name is Naning Triana from 6A of English Education Department. Here, I want to explain about steps data analysis in quantitative research. Of course, data analysis and measurement with lecturer Mr. Inwardi, MED. Okay, the first point is, why choose a quantitative research approach? Okay, the first question that often arises in the minds of researchers, especially novice researchers, is why should you choose quantitative research approach? Okay, this question then led researchers to study what quantitative research is, what are the steps or research flow, how to conduct this quantitative research, and how to draw conclusions from the analysis carried out. And therefore, in this study, the tries to explain in the terms of understanding to drawing conclusion. Okay, what is quantitative? According to MZIR, stated that the quantitative approach is a research approach that primarily uses the positive paradigm in developing knowledge, such as thinking about cause and effect, reduction to variables, hypotheses, and specific questions, using measurement and observation as well as the theory testing, using research strategies such as experiments and surveys that require statistical data. Okay. Now, about research flow, the flow of quantitative research is describing starting from building problem based on theory and practice to reporting research results. Okay, you can see the picture in this slide. Now, about pilot study, according to Zubaydah, 1999, the main objectives of the pilot study are to test the respondent understanding of the item used in the questions and to test the reliability and validity of the study instrument. And the researcher carried out a pilot study to test the validity and reliability of the question used in the study. The answer obtained were used to verify the question item and then used as actual data based on expert reviews and opinions. Interview questions and guidelines were tested in this pilot study. Answer from pilot study conducted illustrated and written interview questions and questions. Next, talking about the hypothesis. The hypothesis is an estimate of the answers that may or may not be obtained from the research problem raised. According to Triana, the hypothesis is a temporary answer to the formulation of research problem. Is it said to be temporary? Because the answers given are only based on the theory and have not used fact, so the hypothesis proposed by the researcher after reading the relevant theories is a temporary answer to the problem that posed. And according to Putrawan, whatever the form of research in general, there are two hypotheses, namely research hypothesis formulated with verbal words with related to relationships of differences, and statistical hypothesis written with parameter notations that can be tested and have two kinds of hypotheses, namely the null hypothesis and hypothesis first or alternative. H1 or HA. Only this hypothesis can be tested with inferential statistics. Now about population and research sample. This is part of step. Okay. The first population here, in general, researchers often have difficulty determining or distinguishing which characteristic of research location can be used as a population or sample. This difficulty is often caused by the existence of criteria in determining the population, namely content, scope, and time or limit time of the population to be studied. Okay. The criteria for population content indicate the size of the population to be studied, and the criteria for the scope here of the study indicate that the selected population is determined by certain characteristics and criteria. The criteria for research time or limit time indicate that research is generally limited in its population based on the category of research time. Now about sample. According to Choi and Piao, 2006, sampling is related to the process of selecting a number of subjects from a population to serve a research respondent. In general, researchers use various sampling techniques based on the characteristics of the population to be studied. For example, using random sampling, non-random sampling, proportional sampling, starting sampling, quota sampling, double sampling, area probability sampling, cluster sampling, purposive sampling, or this is for qualitatively special, ensemble sampling. This is qualitatively special also. If it is associated with the type or research paradigm, the selection of samples in qualitative research is different from quantitative research. In quantitative research, we are familiar with probability sampling, while in qualitative research it's known as unprobability sampling. Again, next about quantitative data collection in techniques. Technique data collection. Okay, the process of collecting data and analyzing data is an important level to ensure the success or failure of study. Before the data is analyzed into finding data must first be collected using certain techniques, which in this case are usually carried out using data collection methods or techniques. In qualitative research, the main data collection methods or techniques or primary data is obtained through interviews, while in quantitative research, the main data collection methods are carried out through questionnaire or tests. The secondary data were respectively obtained from observation and documentation. Data obtained by using one or all of the data collection methods are called file notes. File notes obtained here through questionnaire usually have to pay attention to the scale factor used and the normality of the data obtained, and the accuracy of selecting the scale and determining the normality of the data will determine the quality of the data to be analyzed. If the normality of the data has been achieved, then the researcher can analyze so that the research of the analysis of the data obtained will actually have a high level of validity. Okay, next point about data analysis in quantitative techniques. According to Brennan, 2002, that the data is slightly more valid if it produces more than one type of instrument or more than one type of interview. Qualitative data were also analyzed based on respondent answers and interview protocol is carried out. Okay, the first about descriptive quantitative. Descriptive quantitative in data analysis was used in data presentation, a measure of central tendency and a measure of the spread of data presentation, namely distribution list and histogram. Measures of central tendency are mean, median, mode, which are carried to obtain on a overview the mean, standard deviation, and their interpretation using a formula. Usually, the results of this data description are displayed in the form of a histogram graph of group data and data frequency distribution. Now about inferential analysis. Inference analysis here is used to see the relationships that exist between the variables studied, namely the dependent variable and independent variable. The tests involved in the study are the person correlation test, and one-way ANOVA, and multiple regression or stepwise analysis. Correlation test is a statistical test that can be used to determine the degree of linear relationship between one variable and another. Two variables are said to be correlated if a change in one variable will be followed by a change in another variable, either in the same direction or in the opposite direction. Okay. Now about one-way ANOVA is usually used to compare the mean of two sets of independent samples. This ANOVA test is usually referred to as a one-way analysis of variance. The F test or analysis of variance one-way ANOVA was used if the independent variable in the study were more than 2, this according from Creswell in 2005. Even in the opposite direction in the study, the inference analysis used its multiple regression stepwise to see the value of R to determine the contribution given by the variable studied, referring to Santoso 19 and 20 and 9 to test the hypothesis through multiple regression or stepwise is done. Then to see particularly or the element of the independent variables that can affect the standardized variables. A cadast analysis of interview data begins by reading the interview transcription several times before the transcription is analyzed. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you for attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.